My name is Hannah Roth. I'm a junior at Grinnell College and I'm studying anthropology and history. And I am currently one of, I think, 2 Scheidt undergrad fellows. I'm looking at historical memory and knowledge production, mostly like at the state level through like different genocides. I'm looking at 3 cases. I'm looking at Myanmar and Rwanda and Guatemala, and just kind of like comparing how different states look at genocides and how they like produce certain knowledges and certain understandings of what's happened and how like those narratives might serve certain like state functions or state purposes. So I've been looking at like a lot of different sources, a lot of just academic literature and journals, but also a lot of different media. And one of like a big media source that I've been looking at is the VHA. The testimonies give a really good like baseline of what memory is surrounding certain genocides, but also a lot of other like media sources like documentaries and like social media. I've been looking at a lot of social media recently. So I think like with my specific research, I think that it's kind of in dialogue with a lot of existing research. The things that I've noticed, especially because I'm like trying to do this comparative research, is that a lot of the literature that I'm looking at doesn't really compare different cases, especially like because my cases are in very different regions of the world, like South America, Asia, and Africa, like are all very different places. And I think that a lot of the literature that I've been looking at don't necessarily have that like transnational approach. And so I'm kind of taking all of this different literature and then compiling it into one that looks at these different cases. And I think that it's like just contributing to that conversation in a way that makes looking at different cases a little more accessible and just like easier, because you don't have to be trying to look at all of these different keywords or different articles or journals, because like it's kind of all there in one. First, like when I first came here, I had proposed looking at like sexual violence and communal trauma, and was really like focusing on the testimonies that were talking about sexual violence. And then in one of the testimonies on the Rwandan genocide, I noticed that the woman that was speaking kept on talking about like this specific term gachacha, and I had never heard it before, and I like wasn't really sure what she was referring to. Like, to briefly sum it up, it's like a transitional justice legal practice in Rwanda that is looking to like try people that had commit genocide, but like through a more local court system rather than a national or transnational court system. And so that definitely got me thinking a lot about transitional justice and reconciliation. And I think that specifically reconciliation got me like looking down the path of how people can be reconciled when so many different narratives might exist about a certain event, and how different historical memories may hinder reconciliation and like transitional justice. When I first got here, there were so many different like scholars that were looking at very different topics. Everyone comes from different disciplines, I think, which is especially helpful because it's like they can look at what you're talking about and like what you're researching and how you're presenting it from a lens that might represent a different audience than what you're normally used to. So it's nice to like hear feedback that might not be traditional to my regular discipline. Standouts are definitely like our little center like rendezvous, a lot of meals, which are super fun. And it was just like, it was such a fun little, like, it was like a social gathering, but it also felt kind of relevant to the center's, like, not necessarily the research, but just the goals of like fostering like understanding of these different places. So, and the food was amazing. So immediate what's next for me is I'm going abroad in the fall, which I'm really excited about. And what's next for me in my research is that the process of publication, which I've never gone through, and having like Martha especially to kind of like walk me through like writing for like audiences that I'm not used to. And so that's what I'm like in terms of my research, like trying to find something to get to publish or trying to write something to get published. Not like directly related to the publication, but I've definitely kind of found a new interest in memory studies and like transitional justice, which I had never really had an interest in. And so just kind of furthering, not necessarily like in relation to genocide or in relation to my current research, but just exploring those like topics on a deeper level in the future. To reiterate that my time at the center has been like absolutely amazing, and it's been such a great experience. So